Here from Drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. The discussion today is about Molnupiravir as well. We have now, this is going to be the third discussion. One, we have discussed the mechanism of action of Molnupiravir in an older video. Then we talked about their latest release, about their phase 2-3 trial results, and they are seeking the EUA. And now this is the third discussion. The gist of this discussion is to understand how the process works for FDA and CDC when they are approving some drug and if they are going to approve some drug. And you would see that if they are going to approve something, they are already showing the signs that they are looking to approve that drug and just waiting for the results. So let's see that discussion. There is a lot to be talked about, so I hope that you would enjoy it. Let's start with my here. Okay, so this is the discussion. I had some pain in my neck and this shoulder, so I could not sit for a longer period of time to draw. So today's discussion is mostly written. So my apologies, it is different style, but I didn't have a lot of stamina today to draw. So let's start. I'm trying to figure out where my mouse is here. All right, so Molnupiravir, Bamlanivimab, Remdesivir, Ivermectin studies, trials, disclosures, none. Here is a little cartoon that I drew. This is all I could do. So I would leave it untitled and uncaptioned for your viewing pleasure. Okay, so objectives for our discussion today. I'm going to look at the timeline for Molnupiravir development and trial for COVID-19. Then we're going to look at CDC's various studies, various references, various preprints. The reason for this is that many times I see people's comments either here on YouTube or Twitter or sending me messages that why would somebody talk about a preprint, or why will somebody talk about a study which is open label or which has retrospective look and so on. So I wanted to make sure that as we look at various studies, we can look at how CDC sets the ground for some of these studies. So CDC and FDA, do they reference preprints? Do they have phase 2 and 3 based trial resulting in emergency use approvals, authorizations? So please check this out. Phase 2 and 3 combined means that this is a study that is going to look at the drug dosage and then the efficacy across a broader group. So if I say that we have 1,000 people in a study that is made up of 2 and 3 together, then what you have to look at is what are the number of people that participated in 2, and then what are the number of people that participated in 3. This you would see a lot in drug companies trial. They have kind of honed it as a science to make sure that they can just combine 2 and 3 and just get approval based on that, while you would see some other studies for some other orphaned drugs that these poor drugs and their studies are just going on and they are rejected again and again, even when they do not have such mixtures. So that would be an interesting thing to note today. Then, did the Molnupiravir actually got ordered with a conditional order to say, well, if it gets approved, we'll buy it, or EUA is given, we'll buy it. But the money was actually released, or at least promised in June. I do not know if it is released or not. And you would see that federal government had actually funded this drug as well. So this is not just a simple somebody coming up with the drug. There was involvement of the government in this from early on. That means there were some discussions with the federal government to say, hey, we're going to make some antiviral. Are you going to participate with us? And then the government said, yeah, sure, and we'll give you money. And then the money came in and the funds came in and the drug trial were done. This is a drug that has been sitting in trials and hoping to be approved for something since 2014. And here we are in 2021 approving it um, for COVID. Not approving yet, but it is at the docket now. And then I wanted to compare this to studies like ivermectin as well to see how the ivermectin studies that many folks say are bad studies, not good studies. Can we dig some study that may be useful, that may be comparable, and then compare them? So that is the objective. Let's start. So first of all, the Molnupiravir timeline, and I want to show you this. There is a rich set of I'm going to the here. There is a rich set of links today. I'm going to very quickly show you. This is a link to a tweet where somebody had tried to talk about um, ivermectin. But in here, if you see Dr. Eric Osgood, our own Dr. Eric Osgood, and his comment here, if Mahmood's study was well done, plus showed benefit, and only 16% of professional medical societal treatment. So I'll go into this, but keep this tweet in mind. I have the link to this tweet. Then this is the link that Dr. Osgood was referencing. I would reference this in the discussion too. Then here is an FDA's excerpt for a study, and I'll go over this. Everything that is in the slide deck is present in the links, and the links are in the description. Many times people say, hey, where are the links? So just go to the description of the video, and in the description you have all the links. Today I did an extra thing to earn coffees is to actually I laid out the links the way they are laid out here in these tabs. So you can actually see the links divided in two, classified correctly with the drugs, and then just laid out in the sequence that I have here. And that is the same sequence as the slide deck will be. So there is another FDA's first approval of Remdesivir and how that was approved. We'll look into that too. This is another study, effect of Bamlanivimab, and you would see how Bamlanivimab was approved. Again, I am not against any of these drugs. It is a good thing that we have drugs available. The question is, how is the process look like when it is approved, and how do we see these orphan drugs that are just, you know what I'm talking about. This is another reference. This is about Delta variant. I'm going to go up for a second. Look, Delta variant, and this is CDC's site. But down here, if you see this study here, and this is a great study. Again, this is not a criticism of these studies. This is just an indication of how these processes work. And if we use those processes as well, there should be less criticism because CDCs and FDAs are doing that too. So here, this study is actually a preprint. I have the link open here. This is the same study. If you see Nasreen Sharifa, again, it's a great study, but this article is a preprint and it is linked on CDC's site. Of course, at some point, it's going to become peer reviewed and then accepted. But at this time, it's a preprint and it is here. Then this is the Molnupiravir. What I would request you is to look at the Molnupiravir. It is a phase 2 and phase 3 combined trial. And if you see here, 200 milligram, 400 milligram, 800 milligram, and placebo, this is one part. This one part is phase 2. Then there is a phase 3 part, which is the part 2, which is 800 milligram and placebo. So if there are total participants that are about 700 something, how many divisions of those participants are going to be across these groups? That will be a very interesting thing when we talk about, hey, large random controlled study. Here we have an interesting study, which is yet the data is not fully published, but the study has been stopped, the trial has been stopped, and it is now moving towards the EUA. This is another reference here. This is about the mutagenicity of the Molnupiravir. And what they have over here is this is 2 studies in mice model, and I have no problem with the mice models, where Molnupiravir was not seen to be mutagenic. And you have always seen that I do not just take a position and start bad mouthing something for the sake of doing that. Molnupiravir is a, if it proves to be useful, it is going to be useful. So we should not just start taking positions. For example, I'm seeing so many people saying, well, it is mutagenic. Well, there are concerns that this would cause cancer. There are studies that show that it does not. So I would like us once again to be cool beans. We should know what are the good things of something and what are the bad things of something with data as backup. So we can, when we are saying something, if we are just wrong because we interpreted the data incorrectly or saw the wrong data, that is different, but we should be based on our facts. So here is a discussion. I'll show you that later on. This is Wikipedia. Again, I understand that Wikipedia may be manipulated. For example, mutagenicity is not present here at all. But a history of ivermectin, I'm saying ivermectin, history of molnupiravir is very interesting to see here. So if you see 2014, is since then this drug has been looking for a home, and it has been defense threat reduction agency. It has been supported by some of the federal government agencies as well. So it's not a just cooked drug. It has been out there for some time. Then this is the status for the molnupiravir on drugs.com. It's an interesting one. This is the link that we saw yesterday and we studied yesterday. And I'm going to reference parts of it, but I'm not going to repeat that whole thing. This is the procedure for the trial. This one is ivermectin and the studies for ivermectin. And can we pull just one study that is comparable to this trial? And then can we compare them or not? And if we can compare them, and then we can say, well, Remdesivir or Bamlanivimab or Molnupiravir, based on the similar data, can become approved or have EUA. Why don't those other drugs get similar treatment? So this is this link over here. Then this is FDA approved drug. This is the Kelly study from Australia that started this whole thing. Then this is the study which I'm going to share today. That is the Mahmood study from Bangladesh about ivermectin, and it's a beautifully done study. And one study, and here is a link to the study's power of the count. We'll, once again, when the time comes, we'll discuss that. Here is the WHO's. Remember, WHO had done some study on Remdesivir. The point of this is that there are actually drugs that are authorized, that have EUAs on them, which some studies show that they are of no use. And the EUAs are there. So if you look at some orphan drugs as well, and you would see some studies that say there is no use, some studies say there is use. I don't know why they are seen differently. And then here is another link to a meta-analysis for Remdesivir, where folks have said that, hey, it doesn't really work. And we would see that this continues to be on the approved list. With this, let's start our discussion. So, Molnupiravir timeline. Pandemic was December 2019. Kelly et al. For ivermectin had talked about ivermectin early 2020 as well. Now, if you think about the Molnupiravir, and my apologies, today Luffy's going to stay here. My wife is not here, and I can't let him out because he would just be lost during this time. So he's going to continue to do this. So Emory University invented this molecule. We know that it is a raw material. I've done this mechanism twice now. I'm not going to do it again. In 2014, this molecule Molnupiravir was tested for other viruses. It showed activity against messenger RNA type viruses or RNA viruses that include some coronaviruses. So in March 2020, there was an in vitro study. You can say that there is a parallel here, that very in the similar time frame, June, I think, there was a study on ivermectin too. So there was an in vitro study. In vitro means inside the dish, not in the body. Study on human cells infected with SARS-CoV-2. This is Molnupiravir we're talking about. Look at the parallels between the two drugs. Licensed Ridgeback, which then partnered with Merck. So once this in vitro study was done, I think at that time there would have been further communication. Again, I was not there, so I do not know exactly what transpired. But the result of this was that there was an in vitro study, and then the license from the Emory University was given over to Ridgeback, and then Ridgeback had funding from federal government, and then finally we reached a point in October of last year for the trial. July 2020, Merck announced the intent to trial. So Ridgeback then partnered with Merck in July 2020. Then trial started in October. It was a phase 2 and 3 trial. That is the funny thing here. That is the interesting thing here. Usually we say, hey, for everything, please have your phase 2 and then go to the phase 3. It is a phase 2 and 3 combined trial. And this is not new just for this one. Many other drugs go through this process. So I don't have a problem with the process. My point here is, if this is the process, and if we're going to end up with a smaller number of people participating in one part or the other, then why is that process not applied to other drugs as well? October 2021, this year, trial stopped because the efficacy was proven. And then the EUA request is going to come soon. So now some context as we continue towards the studies and trials and comparison of them. So are there studies or trials? Is there one study or trial sufficient? Is it possible to issue an EUA just based on one study or trial? So yes, FDA on Bamlanivimab, Itesivimab, they said, while the BLAZE-2 study only evaluated dosing with Bamlanivimab alone, check this out. There is a link down here, and I'm going to show it to an FDA site as well. What are we talking about? We are talking about, they are saying while the BLAZE-2 study only evaluated dosing with Bamlanivimab alone. Remember that there are people who say, well, ivermectin and doxycycline, why is that together? And why are you saying ivermectin is useful? Because these are, look, evaluated dosing with Bamlanivimab alone, it is reasonable to expect that Bamlanivimab and Itesivimab together may be safe and effective for post-exposure prophylaxis, as Bamlanivimab and Itesivimab administered together will provide an advantage over Bamlanivimab alone against certain SARS-CoV-2 viral variants. This is not a trial result. This is a conjecture. And link here. Here. So none of the things that I'm discussing are outside the realm of the data. So this is FDA authorizes Bamlanivimab and Itesivimab monoclonal antibodies therapy. And you can see this is 9/16/2021. And this is the data that the excerpt that I just showed you. And just look at this. Those with positive baseline SARS-CoV-2 RT-PCR tests were included in the treatment population. Look at the number, N equals 132. And those with the negative test were included in the prevention population, N 966. And you may have heard from some of the authorities to say, well, we have seen for the other drugs some of the studies and they're not balanced. Here we have a study that is not exactly balanced, but again, the point is not to say, well, why did you do it? Because these drugs are useful. The point is, if there is provision for this kind of data to be part of the process, and based on that, there can be positive decisions made, why not apply this consistently for everything? Okay, so back here. Luffy, please stop. Okay, then, does FDA use open label trials? This is another very common objection that, hey, this was an open label trial. So yes, Remdesivir, for example, a third separate randomized open label multi-center clinical trial of hospitalized adults subject with severe COVID-19 compare treatment with Veklury, which is the Remdesivir, for 5 days. So and look at the number, n equals 197. So let me show you that here. And I took this here. So one randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, one. A second randomized open-label multicenter trial, a third separate randomized open-label, and these were separately added. And I want to show you one more thing. This is really important. This part here. Quality and strength of evidence. Check this out. Quality and strength of evidence of the Infectious Disease Society of America, American Clinical Practice Guidelines. So the Infectious Disease Society of America, what is their guideline made up of? What kind of studies and observations people have reported based on which drugs get approved? And you would actually be interested in seeing this. Check this out. I'm going to read the conclusion first. The IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America, guideline recommendations are primarily based on low quality evidence derived from non-randomized studies or expert opinion. Corey saying, hey, this works. Mubin saying, hey, that works. These findings highlight the limitations of current clinical infectious disease research that can provide high quality evidence. There is an urgent need to support high quality research. Now check this out. This is going to be very, very interesting. Approximately 1/2 of the recommendations in the current guidelines are supported by level 3 evidence derived from expert opinion. 50% of the guidelines are coming from experts saying, I have used this and I think it is working and it is working very well. You should approve it. And that becomes part of the guideline. Evidence from observation studies, level 2, supports 31% of the recommendations. Observational studies. Whereas evidence based on one or more randomized clinical trial, level 1, constitutes, I would add a word here, only 16% of the recommendations. So although this particular study is saying, hey, look, this is bad, we should improve it. But the data that is over here is showing that one study, and based on that, getting the approval or guideline, something to be added to the guideline, 16%. 50% is expert opinion. Okay, back here. So now we understand that there can be one study only. There can be a study that may be open label. This particular case, Remdesivir here, there can be a drug that stays on approval or authorization even when there are studies saying this data, this meta-analysis on the studies shows that the drug is not useful. Again, that doesn't mean that Remdesivir may not be useful. There are some people who said this is great. There are some doctors, expert opinion part, they say, hey, when we use it on our patients, it works great. So I'm not sitting here saying now we should stop Remdesivir. What I'm saying is, here are the processes in front of us that are used. Why aren't the same processes afforded for other drugs too? Okay, does CDC use preprints? So I just showed you, this is a preprint. And this is a great preprint. So look, this is CDC site, Nasreen S, and then Chung H, and here is the study. The study is, this article is a preprint, and what are they talking about? Effectiveness of messenger RNA and Oxford vaccine against symptomatic SARS-CoV-2. How did I see this? I saw, and look at the date here, September 30, so very fresh. I saw this when this weekend I presented vaccine efficacies, latest efficacies to Pakistan Medical Association and some of the colleges. And that is when I was looking at these, and it was interesting. Back here. Is one study trial sufficient? So let me ask you this. Molnupiravir, it's a trial. We actually don't have data. We actually don't have peer-reviewed data. We don't even have commentary on that data. We don't even know which part. It's a combination of phase 2 and 3. total number of people in it are about 700 something. We don't even know how many phase 2 and how many phase 3. We have no idea other than what the company put out. And we are moving towards EUA with that. So Molnupiravir is seeking EUA after one phase 2, and 3 combined trial. Conclusion, and this is the conclusion I showed you before, that this is that Infectious Disease Society of America approving with one or more studies, only 60% approvals. Okay. Do we use drugs proven ineffective in other studies? Do we here use such drugs which may have actually been proven ineffective? As many people say, hey, these extra, which drug I'm not speaking the name of. Here is a drug, and some studies show no effect or less effect. Some don't have some are open label, some are too small in size. Here, Remdesivir, WHO's, look at this. The result for interferon, leave this, look at this highlighted area. But the big story is the finding that Remdesivir produces no meaningful impact on survival. He explained that people will argue about the need for earlier use of Remdesivir, but that even if it brought modest benefits, the absolute number lives saved would be small. And I want to show you here this. Where is it? This one. So this is a meta-analysis, you can say, of the Remdesivir studies, I think 3. And it says rethinking Remdesivir for COVID-19. And they've done some analysis. In this analysis, what they're saying is the following. They're saying, my apologies here, the results of Bayesian reanalysis of the available studies at time of marketing approval for Remdesivir show that these 3 studies, Act 1, GSUS, and Wong et al., are comparable in terms of evidential strength. In terms of mortality rate, the data of these studies point to moderate pro-null evidence. That is, Remdesivir is no more effective than the placebo. Now, I'll keep repeating it before people think that I'm actually against some drug. I have heard many times from patients and from my colleagues who have been giving Remdesivir that in some cases it works like magic. That means if it works like magic, we should keep it in our tool set. But it does not prove its efficacy in the studies and the data. So they're saying Remdesivir is no more effective than the placebo, or ambiguous evidence, meaning that an effect of Remdesivir on mortality rate is actually unclear. Actually, my word. Is it still for us an authorized EUA drug? Yes. If you go to FDA, you can see it there. Okay, continuing. Do we use drugs proven ineffective in other studies? I just showed you. Yes. So now let's do this. An exercise for us. Look at Molnupiravir and to look at some other drugs that may be comparable as well in similar data, and how comparable they are, how good their data is, and how bad their data may be. And I'm just going to pick one study and discuss that. So first, before I go there, we know, so if you go to Ivermectin, for example, meta-analysis. So meta-analysis has its own efficacy calculation based on the meta-analysis. Do you know how I can put this together in front of us? Let's say Molnupiravir. You would see that Molnupiravir's data says it's a global trial run in about 170 centers worldwide. Total people 750 or 70. Divided into 2 groups, one placebo and the other. So 380, 370-ish. Spread in the world. So let's say 20 countries. I'm just making up this number. So I'm just making an example here, a point here. Let's say 20 countries and total 700 people. Would that be, if it was 10 countries, we'll have 70, and if it is 20, we'll have 35 people per country? Then half of them will be placebo, so 13, 14 people. Then this is phase 2 and 3. So if they are equally proportioned, then 400 in one and 400 in other. And if you then divide once again, maybe 100 or 200 in one group versus the placebo. It doesn't look very large. Although they said, hey, we were going for 1600, but we have already proven the efficacy, so we stopped. Fine, good. We have one more tool to use. I'm not sitting here saying Molnupiravir should be a bad drug. I'm just saying there is a process that is afforded. Why is that not afforded to other drugs? So here, Ivermectin, for example, 65 studies, 45 peer-reviewed. This trial is not yet peer-reviewed. It will become peer-reviewed once the data is out there, but the order placement, the trial results, the going for EUA is all happening without all of this peer reviews and this other oversight of the community. Randomized controlled trials for Ivermectin 32. And then there is efficacy over here. So forget about all of that, because what happens is when people start looking at that and they look at this and they say, well, I am upset about this or that. I'm just going to take one study from Bangladesh, which I thought was an interesting one. This is the Mahmood study, which shows efficacy. So I'm going to just look at that one study, just one study, and compare it. And again, I have already answered this question, that can we make a decision about a drug based on just one study? Yes. In 50% of the advice, we actually don't even have a study. It's just the expert opinion. In 30% of the cases, it's just an observational study. In 16% of the cases, only one or more studies. And we are seeing trials done on one. Remdesivir was a similar situation. Why? Because this is an exceptional state. So if we can afford this exceptional state for some of these drugs, why not for these as well? So I'm just going to pick up one and let's look at it. And by the way, for that, the study data, this is the study data, this is their PDF. Why I have it open at this this page, this is page 14, is the following reason. When a study is designed, the power of the study is decided that, hey, what is the power we need? What is the p-value we want to have? P 0. Blah. Based on that, they can calculate using these formulas to say what should be the count of people minimum that we need to have to run this study with this power, with this alpha, with this beta, and so on. So here, study type, interventional clinical trial, estimated enrollment 200. For superior trial, the formula is the following. And they said we use this formula to calculate the numbers. So it's not that they just made up 200 I should have here and 200 I should have there. It is a similar way that, let's say, Molnupiravir or Remdesivir or others would have. Now let's look at some comparisons. Now let's look at this. The Ivermectin study that I just showed you. 200 people in the intervention, and the dose was consistent. Doxycycline plus ivermectin and a specific dose, and that was it. It's not that 100 of them got one and 200 got something else and another 50 got something else. Just one dose, doxycycline and ivermectin, 200 people. And this also means that if you accept this study as a study, and based on that you make a decision, then you accept both. You say ivermectin plus doxy. Although I just showed you in the beginning of this discussion a conjecture by FDA where they said, although the study was done only on one, but we're going to approve two. Okay, here 400 people, 556 were screened. This is the ivermectin side. Mahmood and company, all from Bangladesh. 556 screened, 400 enrolled. They said that we were expecting 20% to be lost to follow up. And this is natural for everything. Even the Molnupiravir and the other studies, they also show how many people were lost to follow up. There are people who are lost to follow up. They just don't follow up anymore. And then 363 on this ivermectin side. On the Molnupiravir trial, they were planning, if you look at the clinical trial site, more than 1,800 participants were planned. So if I go here and I go to if you see here, they said planning was 1,850 participants. In their own, on this page, they say we were planning to have 1,500 and something, but we ended up with 700, although 90%, 95% of the recruitment with the remaining people was done, and but we found the results to be better. So it is somewhere in here they've written it. So look, the planned interim analysis evaluated 775 people. Then down here, if you see, the trial was approaching full recruitment of the phase 3 sample size of 15 patients with more than 90% of the intended sample size already enrolled. So they're saying that, hey, we were expanding, we were doing it. So again, no ding to them. I am just pointing out the process that is afforded. So back here, 775 total, 385 in the intervention, 377 in the control. But please mind you, this is phase 2 and phase 3. On the right side here, I've put this, what are the parts? In the part 1, which I'm suspecting is the phase 2 part, there were people who were given 200, people who were given 400, people who were given 800. And then there was a placebo. So 4 divisions. So now take this 775, divide it to some number. I do not know exact numbers. Divide it in that part to say, well, this was the number of people participating in phase 2. Then, based on the phase 2, take another chunk from this number, or maybe the phase 2 part. I'm going to do a number which is just me making a point. This is not the number I know from the data. Let's say out of 775, there were 400 people selected to go over in these 4 groups. So 200, 400, 800, and placebo, all 100 people each. Then the part 2, the phase 3, is actually 800 and placebo. So maybe from this previous part, they also pulled the folks who were in 800 milligram group. Maybe they went back and gave everyone another course of 400 and 200 to bring them to 800. I'm trying to be more generous towards their division because I do not know the data. But if I just do a rough math by saying half and half, then over here, phase 2 was trialing 100, 100, 100 to placebo. So if they decided to settle on 800 milligram, then really, if it was 100 and 100, that would be a 200 people trial. Then phase 3 will be, let's say 400 people are left here, or 770 from 375, and then half of them in placebo and half in 800. So it's from a compare that to ivermectin type trials, and then see here, and they're very comparable in number. Okay, I'm going to continue. Still on the participants, 363 total on the ivermectin side. Intervention, during the intervention, they said 15 people were lost to follow up, 2 discontinued, 183 completed. And the control group, 17 were lost to follow up, 3 died, and 180 completed. This is the ivermectin side out of the 400. On this Molnupiravir side, again 775, I do not know what was the breakdown of the phase 2 part and phase 3 part. Continuing, characteristics of the studies. One is a trial, one is a study, right? Study is a drug probably has already undergone studies. Ivermectin has been studied before. Now it is being used for a different purpose. So ivermectin study that I showed you, Mahmood study, that was for mild to moderate. So again, for anyone who would say, how did Mubin say that? I'm just going to quickly show you this. Somewhere over here. So here, if you see, the two groups were balanced in terms of demographic and disease characteristics. Most patients presented with fever and cough, respiratory distress, had mild disease. Um, they have somewhere over here written that this was a mild to moderate. So both of that link, you can read it. So ivermectin was mild to moderate. Molnupiravir was mild to moderate. Both, yes. Both were randomized. The Mahmood study was randomized. Both were placebo controlled. One was a phase 2 and 3 together, and one was a study. At least one risk factor was present. So in case of Molnupiravir, they said we chose those people who at least had one risk factor. So on the Mahmood side, I did not find specifically them saying that the patient should have had one risk factor. But again, that is not a necessity for the study. Molnupiravir was making a point for a specific reason, so that was part of their trial. Here they are making a different point, and so this was not part of their trial. But if we continue to compare them on their characteristics, that is interesting that Molnupiravir had one risk factor. Demographics, balanced. They say it on the Mahmood et al. I just read it, I think, when I was looking at it before, that the demographics were balanced. The two groups are balanced in terms of demographics and disease characteristics. Here, Molnupiravir, it's a global study. So if you look at they actually say it with pride, which is excellent. If you see here, it says the move out trial was global. Phase 3. Again, now please remember the numbers that they have presented here. As far as I understand from this study, is numbers for phase 2 and 3 combined. But here they simply say phase 3. Randomized placebo-controlled double-blind multi-site study of non-hospitalized adult patients with lab confirmed this with at least one risk factor. The primary efficacy was this. But look at this, the phase 3 portion. So there is phase 2 and phase 3, right? So phase 3 portion of the MOVA trial was conducted globally. So imagine now we have 400 people in phase 3 part. Total are 775, right? 400 in phase 3 part. Now, where are they all located? Look at this. More than 170 planned sites in countries including, and there are a number of countries here. How many countries? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And this is including. So that means it's not the full list. So even if it is 20 instead of 22, and if you take 400 people, half placebo, half investigation drug, divide them into 20, how many people do you get per country? And then divide them into 170 planned sites. 2 here, 4 there, something like that. Again, that doesn't mean that I am not liking it. Molnupiravir from this efficacy is definitely a useful tool. We should use it. But here is another useful tool. So demographics, ivermectin balanced, Molnupiravir global. So I do not know. I'm sure that they were somehow similar. But you know that when the uh, geographies change, when the socioeconomic statuses change, food types change, there is a lot of change. So are we just looking at 4 people here and 10 people there and comparing them or using them? Is that the meta analysis of 4 here, 10 there, 20 there studies? Non hospitalized, yes and yes, both sides. Primary objective for the Mahmood studies, days for clinical recovery was the primary, and then severity of the disease was secondary. For molnupiravir, hospitalization or death. And it is important that somebody said to me, was very, very upset, that why did I say in my uh, title that there is a study for, for molnupiravir, which is hospitalization or death. But that is how they have. Look, risk of hospitalization or death. So how could I convert that into and death? This is how they reported it. So back here. Secondary for the Mahmood study, disease progression towards severity. Results, Mahmood study. Clinical recovery was shorter and that was significant. And they said in their conclusion that this shorter outcome was not just that the time period was short. It also meant, so if I go to their conclusion, it also meant that less people became severe. That means they were prevented from becoming, hospitalized and dying. So here, adult patients with mild to moderate COVID-19 infection, this is Mahmood study, treated with ivermectin combined with doxycycline recovers earlier than those receiving placebo, were less likely to progress to a serious disease, and were more likely to test negative for COVID-19 at the end of treatment period. So there was a positive, statistically significant outcome. Just one study. And if we say, well, this study is useless as well, then fine. We are looking at many other studies which have similar characteristics and we are accepting them. So, ivermectin, clinical recovery, short term, molnupiravir, they did not do the clinical recovery. They were looking at hospitalization or death. So, hospitalization for Mahmood study, were some people hospitalized? Yes. In molnupiravir, were some people hospitalized? Yes. 28 molnupiravir. On the intervention side, 28 people out of 385 were hospitalized. And on the placebo side, molnupiravir, 53 people out of 377 were hospitalized. Once again, this is phase 2 and 3 together. Severity increase. On the Mahmood study, 16 out of 183 became severe. In the ivermectin side, 32 out of 182 became severe on the placebo side. Here, molnupiravir, 28 out of 385. Again, I'm using 385 and 377 because I actually do not know the phase 2 versus phase 3 numbers. So I'm just using the whole chunk of number that they have reported for the whole cohort. So 28 out of 385 molnupiravir. So if you stratify them, they almost come almost similar. So here is 28 out of 385, here 16 out of 183 versus 53 out of 377, here 32 out of 180. And then deaths. In the ivermectin Mahmood study, 0 out of 200 for ivermectin, 3 out of 200 for placebo, and on the molnupiravir, 0 out of 385, once again without knowing the breakdown of 2 and 3, 0 out of 385 versus 8 out of 377. Good results. No death. I would take it. The response, what did then we do? What did the world do to this? On Mahmood study, they said EUA, no. Molnupiravir, I wrote don't know, but you know that they're saying that we are going to apply soon. So until they have it, I can't write here that they have it. But it seems like they would. Intent to use this drug, the intent to use molnupiravir became clear even in June, although it was a conditional purchase to say if you got the approval, then you have this 1.2 million billion dollars and you have order for 1.7 million doses courses. So that's conditional. So I can't just sit here and say, you know what, the government just already had bought it. But these discussions were happening before the trials were over and the results were there. The other side, the poor drug, intent to use, no. Doctors penalized, checked by pharmacists, by the retail stores, by the mainstream media, banned on mainstream media, banned on places. I do not know what would happen to this talk. Just to talk about the studies, just to talk about the efficacy. Mainstream media attacking it, you know that the horse paste is attacked all the time. Will molnupiravir get any such treatment? Not at all. And again, I am not heartburnt that molnupiravir would not get it. Any tool that would help us at this time is useful. I would take the same approach of saying this is a useful tool, and I would apply that same useful tool approach to other tools that may be useful as well. Banned on YouTube for COVID impact? Yes, by name, ivermectin is banned. Ivermectin itself is not banned on YouTube, but if you say ivermectin helps this disease, banned. Technical information about these two. IV, already in production for decades, safety profile known, where is it bad known, where is it good known, kids use or not, adults use or not, known. Molnu, 2014 is since then they are trying it in various trials, so it's not in production, so don't know yet. It is interesting that pandemic has given a chance for Remdesivir, for Molnupiravir to find a place to be effective and useful. Disrupts RDRP. So Molnupiravir is raw material. It disrupts RDRP. Ivermectin's, the data, the mechanisms that we have discussed from various studies. Yes. Interfere with the viral binding to ACE2. That was an in silico study. So I'm bringing that up so that we can say, well, I dismiss that. It's a computer simulation. So don't want to use that. Fine. It's an in silico study where they saw that ivermectin molecule interferes with the ACE2 binding. Molnupiravir interferes with the viral binding? No. Interferes with 3-chymotrypsin-like protease enzyme? This side yes, that side no. Helps keep the interferon levels strengthened? This side yes, that side no. Is anti-inflammatory as well, nuclear factor kappa B? This side yes, and that is why we use it for scabies and other such things. And the other side no. Safe, I've made them both yellow here. Why? You can say, well, Mubin, what are you doing here? I made them both yellow. Molnupiravir, we do not know yet at scale that what is the safety. Smaller groups, yes. Similarly, ivermectin, one can argue that ivermectin has never been used in this way, with this therapeutic dose, with this frequency, and so we do not know the safety, although we have been seeing its use for 18 months now. But sure, I'll grant that. It's equally, let's say, unknown, although I think differently. Price. Ivermectin's availability is everywhere. It's being produced everywhere. It is in pennies. And then Molnupiravir, $700 for a course, 10 pills, $70 per pill. But again, to be fair to Merck, the they had mentioned in their statements that they would calibrate the price according to a country's capability or capacity to pay. And I think they also had said that because in India there is a humanitarian crisis going on because of COVID, they would help there as well. Although, luckily, fortunately, India is actually coming out of that situation. But I wanted to make sure that we just don't sit here and make up things. They have said that they would calibrate. Calibrate to what? I don't know. In the US, at least for us, it is $70 per pill. Peer reviewed studies, this side, yes. Molnupiravir, not yet. So as it becomes part of production, just like Remdesivir, there will be more. The trial itself, we do not have sufficient data yet to say it is peer reviewed or even commented on. US government funded, no, yes. Birth defects. So there is an animal study for the Molnupiravir animal study that there may be a chance of birth defect. Now, if you take that to the ivermectin as well, we know that ivermectin should not be given to pregnant women and should not be given to children under 2 years of age because it can cause effect on the nervous tissue. So I'll give you that fine, they're common. And even for ivermectin, this study is not in women or humans. That study is also observed in animals. If you read Goodman Gilman, 13th edition, they say that the side effect of ivermectin in the pregnant women for their embryos and the younger children has been observed in animals. We do not know the effect on humans. That is the same thing for molnupiravir. It is seen in animals, do not know in humans. And I read for the molnupiravir where they said this will be up to the administrator to decide, but we have this study. Mutagenic? No. And for molnupiravir, no as well. At least I don't want us cool beans to start saying it is mutagenic because I'm seeing so many people starting to say that. That will not be right. There are studies that show that it is not. And let me just very quickly read that for us. This is the last part, then we are done. So here, this is the title is Developing a Direct Acting Orally Available Antiviral Agent in a Pandemic, the Evolution of Molnupiravir as a Potential Treatment for COVID-19. This is June 18. And here, consequently, two distinct in vivo rodent, so animal studies, mutagenicity assays that are recognized. I hope the audio and everything is working. I've been speaking for what, an hour now? So I hope the OBS is working. Okay. Consequently, two distinct in vivo rodent mutagenicity assays that are recognized as robust tools for evaluating mutagenicity and for assessing human risk for mutagenicity, the pig A mutagenicity assay and the big blue transgenic rodent assay, were conducted. In both assays, which were run at doses and durations significantly greater than those being used in the clinic, the impact of molnupiravir treatment on mutation rates was not differentiable from mutation rates observed in untreated historical control animals. Additionally, molnupiravir was negative for induction of chromosomal damage in vivo micronucleus with and without metabolic activation and in vivo rat micronucleus assays. So the point is, there is no study to show that, and we should not fall into that trap of just saying negative things. So here we are. This is the discussion. I hope it was useful to see that sometimes just one study is sufficient. And that one study, if it is robust enough, can become basis for moving forward. So that is a discussion. Please, if you like this talk, like, subscribe, and share. We may actually, we'll see what happens. And if you would like to support this work as well, there are links in the description where you can either support it by buying me a coffee or becoming a patron, or you can even use PayPal to support it. Thank you very much, and I would see you in a few minutes.